We live in scary times for the Christian community, but the question is, are you ready for the mission at hand? Because we live in also one of the most exciting periods of history for being a Christian as well. Scary, but exciting. Listen, we live in an era where stealing, looting, murder, all that stuff's tolerated, where cities are burnt down, allowed by the government, by fire. Foreigners are allowed to devour our land and all our resources. But listen, here's the interesting and really cool news. Isaiah, the prophet, dealt with the same exact issue in the first book of Isaiah, chapter 1. So we have a really good blueprint to guide us through the current troubles into calmer waters. But this entails you and I, all believers, to step up and accept God's mission and his calling in his time, which is now. You guys ready? Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. You know, Reason for Truth, the truth always comes first. Then we give you the reasons, but what we're always in constantly learning, because we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. The problem is a lot of people, sometimes they learn from some crazy sources. You want biblical, truthful sources. That's why you come to Reason for Truth. Let's just jump right in. The prophet Isaiah wrote in chapter 1, he said this: "Your country lies desolate. Your cities are burnt with fire. In your presence, foreigners devour your land. It is desolate as overthrown by foreigners." Oh my gosh, that's 2024 when this is being recorded. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 7. That is us. Go back and reread that yourself. Does this sound familiar though? 2020 riots, 2024 where we're at, with all the cities being taken over by migrants. In an article published by National Review by writer Jim Garrity, August 26, by the way, 2020, during COVID, 10:04 a.m., author writes, "So far, the first 8 months of the year 2020 has seen riots in Atlanta, St. Louis, Seattle, New York City, Minneapolis, Chicago, Oakland, Denver, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Trenton, Atlantic City, Boston, Louisville, Bakersfield, Columbus, Dallas, Des Moines," it's Iowa, "Detroit, Los Angeles, Sacramento, Phoenix, San Jose, and I'm sure," he says, "I miss some less covered violence." Residents of Portland have endured 87 straight nights of protest on the streets. Portland, 23 more arrested Sunday night when he was writing this. Nearly 20 riots declared over the past 3 months. If this isn't Isaiah 1:7, I don't know what is. And you could see that history repeats itself. So we think, oh, this is the first time in history, it's the end of the world. What do you think people said during Isaiah's time? They didn't have internet, telephone, they didn't have any technology. They just basically walk up, talk to somebody, right? Maybe chisel it into a piece of rock or parchment. All right, in our short lifetime, we've seen rioting, looting, and now a mass influx of people from other countries, undocumented, against the formal laws of the United States, kind of mass up. But this seems to be very much in line with the state of Judah during Isaiah's term as prophet. In Isaiah's lifetime, Judah was subjected to attacks from Israel, Syria, Edson, Philistia, and Assyria. Later, she would be captured by Nebuchadnezzar. Remember King Nebuchadnezzar? That was between 606 and 586 BC. But a bit of context, the first 6 chapters of the book of Isaiah functions as a prologue to the entire book, introducing the relationship between God and Judah. And in the first 9 verses of the first chapter of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah begins delivering a message, starting in verse 2 when he calls the heavens and the earth as witness to God's indictment. Pretty strong. The language used is very similarly found in the announcement of the formal, like a legal case going to court. That you'd something, and you can see examples of that even, which came out of Deuteronomy, by the way. Check out chapter 30, verse 19, chapter 31, 28, and also chapter 32, verse 1. And that's where we got the American justice system from. Really, Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy played a big part of that, using the Mosaic law. But God's first legal charge was that the Israelites were rebellious, much like America and the West are today, including, sadly, many churches. In verse 3, Isaiah highlights the nation's ignorance of God's ways and their refusal to adhere to them. And as a result, their refusal to turn back to God resulted in none other than their own suffering. And I would say today, our suffering, It was described as, you know what he described it, Isaiah did, as a beating or stricken in verse 5. That's pretty bad. I think we're taking a beating right now through God's discipline. But this takes us to today's verse, which verse 7, which again says, your country lies desolate. Your cities are burned with fire, and in your presence foreigners devour your land. It is desolate, is overthrown by foreigners. This talks about foreigners twice here, Isaiah 1:7. What had happened is that the land of Judah was destroyed and was being overthrown by strangers. Verse 7, it's the word strangers. As a result, Judah had become like an abandoned hut in a harvested field. Verse 8, simply put, Judah rejected and abandoned God, and God abandoned Judah in the sense that he left Judah to their own devices. I'm going to do a whole nother episode on this. What is God's judgment? It's removal of his hedge of protection and provision. Void of God's protection and provision, we're kind of man naked before the world. We're just exposed, Christian or not. In whole, these images speak to this relationship between God and Israel in proper context here in Isaiah, but the story doesn't end there, and in application, it applies to us today. But here's the great news. We serve a God of hope. And in America 2024 and the West and even in Europe, we've seen a mass influx of undocumented people from other countries flooding into our country. This is nothing short of an international or global kind of a takeover, an effort to overthrow the existing political system, I think, in part. And also, I'm not going to harp on that because it's not everything is not hopeless. You get lemons, you make lemonade. So don't get me wrong. Where there's a will, there's a way. And increased suffering of America is going to wake people and is waking people up. We got to get back to God. We've just been a little too comfort. So here's my point. Government leaders are placed or allowed to be put in place by God. So I would submit the things we're going through right now, we brought on ourselves. I'm sure there's people, on the other side of the aisle going, oh yeah, we shouldn't be on any side of the aisle. We should just be godly. But I don't say politically, but I think seeing things through a Christian worldview, you'll see that this is true, okay? Because in the end, you don't take anything with you anyways, right? So let's talk about hope. The suffering of Israel was not without a glimmer of hope either. They had hope. Despite their rebellion, God wouldn't make them like Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 9, that's a pretty nice thing. What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, God promised or told them in verse 9, I'm not going to make you like Sodom and Gomorrah, meaning I'm not going to burn you up, just kill you. He would not destroy them completely, but would leave a remnant to rebuild the nation. I think God is doing that with Christians today. He's going to burn off the dross. He's going to leave the wheat and chaff. He's going to let the wheat remultiply. With this in mind, if you ask me, my sense is that the worst is still to come. I do. I think the worst is still to come, but it always gets worse before it gets better. And we are wise to prepare the levels of trusting God and getting into His Word, seriously into His Word, seriously into prayer, seriously into a good church, and leave the bad churches that permit anything and say, just be yourself, right? It's okay to be yourself. Just don't accept simple self as acceptable behavior, mind, thought, and action. But in the long run, despite America's waning power and influence and affluence in the world, the world's currency is the world's money supply, basically, unit, and as the world's superpower, all that stuff is kind of fading away. And I'm confident, though, that the Lord's going to preserve a remnant of authentic Christians to rebuild, not only in America, but in nations around the world. Like we've been doing for years, I think it's going to be sped up. But I think America is going to see pockets of believers. And listen, there's nothing greater and more people who are connected to the true God of the universe change the world, because God changes the world through them. But my question to you simply today is, are you ready for the mission at hand? And that's what I'm going to leave you with today. You got to decide that for yourself. Because if you think that everyone else is going to take care of it, you can just hit the boat or sit on the water, kick your feet up, watch the sunset. Got another thing for you. You will be held accountable to that. So I hope you take it. And I'm just saying, so will I. All of us will. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. As long as it's kept in check, as long as you are sacrificially giving to move God's kingdom forward, serve Him, and serve others. That's pretty harsh, it's pretty strict, but that's the truth. Hey, I want to help equip you to hit your mission hard, man. The way you do that, first place to go is equippedacademy.com. There are all kinds of training programs for marketplace. Listen, for just living your life, apologetics, all kinds of stuff. We have one coming out in God and government. It's going to be really really neat comes out of my book, Right for You, but Not for Me. Then what you could do is something that doesn't cost you a dime unless you want to support the effort is go to my community. It's StephenGarofalo.com. I want to see you over there. Join today. Doesn't matter where in the world you are. Listen, man, you could be in Indonesia. You could be in Cambodia. What are you waiting for, guys? Come on, Cambodia. Let's get on up there. Europe, come on, Italy. My own people killing me over here. Let's just join up. Portugal, the same thing. Get into the community, StephenGarofalo.com. There's an option to join as a member, but you get a lot for free in there. And that's the most important thing, is that we get into a community and we get to better encourage and to listen, give reasons for truth. Besides that, listen, make sure, man, you reach down below, bam, hit that subscription button. Then we'll see you over the next episode. But for right now, I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and you know what I say, this is your Reason for Truth for today.